All right, let's just get right into it. I want you to forget everything you think you know about Figma. Seriously, we're not going to talk about pixels or vectors today. We're talking about something way more important, strategic clarity. We're going to dive into why the actual structure of your Figma file might be the most honest reflection of your thinking you'll ever find.
And this, right here, is the big idea for our whole explainer. Stop thinking of Figma as just a place to make things look pretty. Instead, think of it as a thinking surface. It's a place where you build, you test, and you refine your actual logic. It's where your strategy literally becomes visible.
Okay, let's make this personal for a second. Imagine your CEO, or an investor, or even just your boss, looking over your shoulder. Not at a polished PowerPoint slide, but at your raw, work-in-progress Figma file. What would they see? A clear, structured argument, or just a chaotic digital mess? The answer to that question reveals a whole lot.
And look, this isn't just some abstract theory. At the world's absolute top tech and consulting firms, we're talking Google, McKinsey, Airbnb, the most critical strategic documents are being built in Figma, not PowerPoint. We're talking product roadmaps, complex user journeys, even financial models. And there is a very, very good reason for that.
Just think about why this is such a game changer. That infinite canvas, it lets your ideas breathe, you know? You're not trapped in the little box of a single slide. Live collaboration turns strategy from this lonely monologue into a dynamic, real-time conversation. Reusing components lets you build these scalable systems of logic. And version history? Well, that's basically the DNA of your idea, letting you trace its entire evolution from a tiny spark to a fully formed plan.
So here's the crucial point, the real takeaway. Figma is a mirror. A polished PowerPoint can hide fuzzy, unclear logic behind a beautiful template. But Figma can't lie. If your strategy is convoluted or messy, your layers panel will be an absolute mess of confusing names and illogical groups. It's like an instant stress test for the clarity of your thinking.
So, if Figma is this mirror, how do we actually use it to sharpen our thinking? Well, let's start looking at the interface itself, not as a bunch of tools, but as a system for making strategic decisions. Let's call it the decision stack.
This is such a brilliant way to frame it. Your layers panel on the left, that's not just a list of shapes. That's your org chart. It shows how all your ideas relate to each other, who reports to whom. The big canvas in the middle, that's the battlefield, where all those ideas are deployed and compete. And the properties panel on the right, that's your budget. It's how much visual weight, how much color, how much space you allocate to every single element.
Here is a super powerful test for your own work. Try it. Aesthetics, they can be seductive, but they can also mask a real lack of substance. If the core logic of your diagram completely falls apart without all the visual decoration, it means your thinking just isn't strong enough on its own. Structure has to come first. Always.
Okay, so if structure is everything, that brings us to what is probably the single most important and most commonly misunderstood decision you will ever make when you're architecting ideas in Figma. Honestly, this one choice is what separates the amateurs from the pros.
It all comes down to this: using a group versus using a frame. See, a group is like a rubber band. It's temporary, it's flimsy, and it distorts things. You resize it, and everything inside stretches out all weird. But a frame? A frame is a proper structural container. It has its own rules, its own internal physics. It's what allows you to build scalable, resilient systems of thought.
And the rule of thumb is incredibly simple, but it is totally transformative. Here it is. If an element in your diagram might ever need to change, resize, or get used again somewhere else, it has to be a frame. Period. Groups are disposable. Frames are for building things that last.
And believe me, this isn't just some academic debate. Airbnb actually measured the real-world impact of this one simple change. Their strategy team saved, on average, 18 hours per person per year just by using frames instead of groups. That's more than 2 full workdays of productivity just from thinking more clearly in the tool.
Okay, so once you've built on that solid foundation of using frames, let's look at a few other habits that really define professional-grade work. This is all about making sure your logic can actually scale and survive being handed off to other people without you having to explain it for an hour. Just look at the difference here. A junior-level file is littered with default names like Rectangle 187. A profile, though, uses clear, descriptive names. But a senior level pro, they use prefixes, like O2, to literally force the layers panel to sort itself into a logical, readable hierarchy. It's brilliant.
And this is so crucial. Your layers panel should be scannable. Someone should be able to understand the entire structure of your argument just by reading the layer names, without even looking at the canvas. That isn't just being neat, it's what you'd call strategic hygiene. It makes collaboration absolutely seamless.
So, you've built a solid structure, you've named everything perfectly. Now for the ultimate test. Does it actually work? The benchmark for this comes from the super high-stakes world of management consulting.
This is the bar. 10 seconds. That is all the time you have to communicate your main idea to a busy executive who has a million other things on their mind. Your diagram has to be so clear, so logically structured, that the insight is immediate and just undeniable.
So how do you pass this brutal test? Well, it all comes down to these fundamental rules. You need that clear parent-child hierarchy so everyone knows what's most important. You need consistent spacing so the relationships between ideas are obvious at a glance. You use visual weight and logical, minimal color to guide the eye, not just to decorate. It's about architecting your logic so it's literally impossible to misunderstand.
And that, right there, is the big takeaway. This whole approach, from using frames to naming your layers to passing that 10-second test, it has nothing to do with aesthetics. It's about being a better, clearer thinker. It's about architecting your ideas with so much rigor that the insight becomes totally self-evident. So I'm going to leave you with this final thought to really reflect on. Go back to your own work. Imagine stripping away all the visual polish, all the pretty colors and drop shadows. Is the underlying structure, the raw logic of your strategy, is it still clear? Is your thinking still undeniable? When the answer to that question is yes, you're no longer just designing, you're architecting clarity.